It's Believe in Texans podcast with Cecil Shorts, former Houston Texan. I've got some questions about his tenure with the Texans a little bit later in the show. Cecil, Lamar Jackson, we still don't know whether he's going to play or not. It might be gamesmanship by John Harbaugh, and there's no way. It's for whatever it's worth. D'Amico Ryans has basically said, "Look, we're preparing as if Lamar Jackson's going to be healthy." I think that's the appropriate the appropriate strategy at this point.
Absolutely. I do think there's some gamesmanship to it. I think every franchise does it, like just try to hold off as much as they can until they have to give up all the information. But you have to prepare just in case. Like, he's a special athlete, and if he can get out there, he's going to do everything he can to get out there. But I think it hurts you if you don't prepare, because he brings so much to the game.
Yeah.
So if you're not prepared for what he can do and what the offense will look like when he is in there, you're putting yourself at a deficit, right? You can always adjust to more of a passing style type offense or a run heavy offense throughout the game if it's Cooper Rush. But if you got Lamar Jackson in there, you got to make sure you're on your P's and Q's. And as you know, as a defensive lineman or linebackers, it's more maybe assignment football, possibly.
Yeah.
Depending on what the offense wants to do. So yeah, I'm with D'Amico. You have to prepare like Lamar is going to play.
It really is when you face a quarterback like Lamar Jackson, and because the Ravens do such a good job of putting the defense in a bind with the option game, with the RPOs, with all of that stuff, that you need the reps. Like, if you don't get the reps, and if you're not taking mental reps, and if you're not watching film and just imagining yourself in those scenarios, you get into the game and like you don't have time to, as a defensive end, to think like, okay, I want to confirm that he's not handing the ball off here. And after that, I'm going to rush up to the upfield shoulder. It's just, everything's got to be automatic. The risk management part of it is just that the downside of not being prepared enough for Cooper Rush is not nearly as big as the downside of not being prepared for Lamar Jackson. As it looked like they weren't prepared for him last year on Christmas Day. This is D'Amico Ryans when asked, how do you replicate a guy like Lamar Jackson in practice?
And not replicate Lamar Jackson. I have no one here that can help me. You try to put receivers or other skill players at the quarterback position, but it's different. When you see Lamar on Sundays, you see that's a bad man, right? So, nobody can replicate him. He's a special player, all in a league of his own. So we don't even try to replicate him.
Yeah. Were you ever the quarterback in practice when you were facing a fast receiver? Did they have you do scout team quarterback or anything?
Yes.
Or a fast quarterback? Yeah.
Yes. So I was when Tyrod was with the Bills, 2015-ish. They had me at scout team quarterback.
Oh,
so it was fun. I had a blast because I played quarterback in college. I played quarterback a little bit in college. I played my whole life up until college. So I was doing a zone read, and I got a chance to go against J.J. Watt and made him miss a couple of times. It was fun. It was a blast. Now, it was terrifying. I've never been against defensive linemen that big coming from a D3 school. I'm like, God, dog.
A different
world.
No kidding. So you'd never seen a picture like that, or just even watching the defensive backs converge and all that. See how I loved standing behind the offense in practice and just trying to imagine myself as quarterback and being like, no, like, how did you know that little sliver of a window is going to be open for that amount of time?
I felt so small back there too. I'm 6 feet, but I felt so like tiny behind the offensive lineman and trying to see through. No way you can see over them. You got to see through the different lanes. It was definitely an experience.
Yeah, I think when people try to downplay whether it matters if you're a taller or shorter quarterback, it's hard to explain, I guess, until you stand right behind there and see that, okay, it does matter. Guys can overcome it, but it's a consideration. You gotta take it into account.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, all right, I'm the same way. And even if Lamar Jackson does play, then there's the whole question of whether how mobile is he or isn't he? And this is where the really fascinating thing, and we'll get into the Ravens' defensive issues, but on offense, look, I showed you that stat the other day of the Texans are the first team since the 1974 Cowboys to have a losing record through the first 4 games of a season, despite allowing fewer than 13 points per game. So, like, no matter how well the Texans defense have been playing, they're a losing team right now. The Ravens are the exact opposite. This stat is from last week, but it's still relevant with the Ravens. The Ravens have scored 111 points going into week 4. That's the most through 3 games by a team with a losing record in NFL history, according to ESPN research.
Wow.
So the Ravens are in the exact same boat. They've been scoring points in by the boatload, and the defense has just been that bad. Right now, FanDuel still has the Texans as a 1.5 point favorite. I think that's probably the best indication that most people don't expect Lamar Jackson to play. But the big question in Baltimore has been, all right, why are we not using Derrick Henry? Derrick Henry went off in week 1 of the regular season, the 100+ yards to an extreme degree. And then in the last 3 games, he hasn't had more than 50 yards rushing in any of those games. He's run a total of 31 times in 3 games combined, that's like that can be, you see plenty of games where Derrick Henry has 25+ carries. And then John Harbaugh, after the game last week, was asked about play calling and not running in short yardage situations. He gave a really a surprisingly critical response.
The other 4 early short yardage, 3rd and 4th down, you guys passed for it instead of running for it. You didn't get any of them. Was that just a situation where you felt like they were out leveraged in certain spots?
Yeah, I mean, that's play calling. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm happy about it at all. I'm sure that Todd's not happy about it either. None of us are. So you got to look at that and decide what you want to run there. In some of those circumstances and situations. But if they work, they look good. They threw the ball on 4th and short and 3rd and short a few times and completed them. So maybe we just need better plays. We need plays that are going to pop open. Maybe we've got to do a better job of game planning those plays. That's what I would say. I mean, I think that we need to put our guys in better position and give them opportunities to make plays in those situations.
Yeah, so he's talking about Todd there as Todd Monken, the offensive coordinator. And I'm just looking at this perfect storm of you got Harbaugh questioning why they're not running in short yardage situations. Orlovsky today had a stat that because he was watching film and he's thinking to himself, why it doesn't seem like they're running the ball on 1st and 2nd down all that much. So he had his stat people look it up, and it's that the Ravens are giving the ball to running backs on 1st and 2nd down at the lowest rate in the league. Well, meanwhile, they're the 2nd best. They're getting 6 yards per carry when they do it. And Monken is a guy who's been in the NFL and college, but at Georgia is where he had his most success, and he comes to the Ravens, and it feels like Harbaugh is trying to say to Monken, look, we got to get back to basics and play some smash mouth football here.
You can. Well, I love Monk. I played for Todd in Tampa Bay. Love him.
Okay,
love him.
Yeah,
awesome receiver coach, awesome offensive mind, but it's hard because you got Lamar Jackson, one of the best football players to ever play, like period. So do you want the ball in his hands or Derrick Henry's hands, right? So I think it's easier said, like, oh, you got to run the ball more. Well, hell, you got one of the best quarterbacks to ever play that can do it all, right? And you put him in position to succeed. And hear me out, that offense is scoring at a super high clip.
Right. Right.
It's not like they're not. It's not like they're playing bad or they're struggling like kind of like the Texans offense trying to figure out their identity. They know who they know how to score, and their offense is going well. I don't know if they know who they are. I do agree they should run the ball more, but it's going to be interesting to see what they do against the Texans because the Texans defense is so stout and they have not given up tons of points. So can that offense continue to score? Will they try to run more versus the Texans because their front 7 is pretty good?
This is going to be such a weird game because I'll add on to this. Everything you said is valid. They're still scoring points, and Lamar Jackson as a runner when he's healthy, obviously can be your 1st and 2nd down running. But then there's the side of Derrick Henry where Derrick Henry is a guy who hardly ever fumbles. He went 400 some touches at one point in his career without fumbling. He's fumbled 3 times this year. So I don't know if maybe they're not using Derrick Henry that much because of whatever's off with him, whether it's injury or whatever it might be, that he's not his normal self. And then the other thing on top of that, why I say it might end up being a weird, crazy, funky game, is that you look at the Ravens, their backs up against the wall. They do a lot of really good stuff with misdirection and everything. But then you got Harbaugh, who's a former special teams coach. And I feel like this is a game where they're gonna pull every trick out of the bag. And whether it's gadgetry, whether it's whatever it might be, I just feel like on special teams there might be some craziness. Like they might really say we got to do whatever it takes. I know the Texans are struggling, but we've got half our team is injured right now.
No, I'm totally with you. I think in his press conference, he talked about like this is a game for us to get back on track, right?
Yeah.
Well, in their mind, they're thinking they got to find a way to win, especially if Cooper Rush is in. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's trick plays in the offense, if there's trick plays or something on special teams to do whatever they got to do to get an advantage to get that win on Sunday.
So the injury situation, which I just alluded to, the Texans aren't too bad. Will Anderson had a rest day on Wednesday. Foley Fatukasi had a shoulder. There was Derek Stingley. Derek Stingley was the other notable guy that didn't practice, and he didn't practice on Wednesday last week. I think he's probably just managing that injury, which he played pretty well through. The Ravens, I don't know if this is going to fit on the screen, but there's the Ravens injury report, and it is the biggest thing to know is that honestly. Their defensive backfield, so Awuzie and Wiggins, their starting outside corners, are out. Marlon Humphrey, the slot, he's out. And those guys, Awuzie especially, had not been playing very well at all. You got all those guys. Matabike is on IR, so he's not even listed here. Roquan Smith was out. Patrick Ricard, the fullback, was out. You know that I'm more concerned than most other people would be about the fullback just because the Ravens do a really good job with their wham plays and things like that, especially against the Texans. So I shouldn't say I'm concerned. I'd actually be excited if Ricard was out. If I had to choose between Lamar Jackson and Ricard, I would prefer that Lamar Jackson be out. But obviously, like Ricard might be a bigger loss to them, especially if Lamar Jackson's already out than otherwise. You and I are in the same boat. Like, yeah, I can look at all those injuries for the Ravens, and it's the Ravens, and they've had the Texans number to such an extreme degree.
They know how to win. They have weathered storms before. Harbaugh is one heck of a leader. If I'm not mistaken, he's a Super Bowl champion. Like if you're in the Ravens uniform, you're in there for a reason. And it's a certain mindset and standard they have regardless of the circumstances. So it just doesn't make me comfortable. I see all those injuries and all those DBs out, and I'm like, oh, yeah, CJ can toss it around. No, they're going to figure out a way to be in the game. It's going to be close. And like you said, they have right now, if I'm honest, I think it's a mental advantage. Like, hey, we can beat the Texans. Like, we'll be fine. We beat them the last 3-4 times every other year. Like, we will kick their butt.
George, there's another dynamic here with the Texans right now that reminds me of something from when you played. Because in 2015, when you were with the Texans, George Godsey started off as the play caller on offense. And then it's somewhere along the way, Bill O'Brien took over. And I can't remember at what point in the season that was. But, obviously right now the Texans have a first-time play caller on offense. Texans have one of the worst offenses in the league. And it's kind of relevant if you at some point get to talking about changing play callers. What was it like when Godsey was calling plays and then maybe when the transition was made?
You know what? One thing I think, and Billy O, I think he has a great offensive mind. But I think he was a newer head coach. He kind of was an overbearing parent to Godsey. Mm-hmm. So anything Godsey did, he criticized. Anything Godsey wanted to do, he was on top of him. He wouldn't let him just be. And I think when you're a head coach, you have to be more, and especially an offensive guy, right? You have to be more of letting him if he asks you for advice, give it to him, but let him grow up himself. And then off camera or off, outside of meeting rooms, go up to him, say, hey, we should do A, B, and C, get better at 1, 2, 3. He was way too hands-on. Yeah. Way too critical at different times, right? And that's just how he was at that moment. I'm not sure if he's the same now. And George, we all saw it. George just wasn't ready. Now, he just made some mistakes and wasn't ready. So Bill eventually took back over the reins. But when you're a head coach, I feel like you got to let him make his mistakes, encourage him, be there for him, and then behind closed doors, get on his behind like you need to. So when it comes to D'Amico, handing it off to the defensive coordinator, letting him call the plays. Okay, let him have his lumps, let him have his ideas, go through the good and the bad with him. But now he gets to see the offense and the defense. Yeah. So now he can comment on both. Hey, Kaylee, maybe run the ball more here. Hey, Kaylee, make sure you're doing this. Hey, Kaylee, don't forget about this in time management. Then go back to the DC and say, hey, this, and that. So I think he had more range. Because when you're calling the plays, your focus is on the plays.
Right.
Head coach or not. If you're calling offense or defense, your focus is on that particular side of the ball and trying to figure out, because even when they're not on the field, right? Hey, what about that third down play? What did we do wrong? Like, what about that second down play? Is this opportunity open? Is that opportunity open? So it's so much going into it. Now D'Amico has a shot to really observe every single thing and grow for himself as a head coach.
Yeah, and I guess from Nick Haley's standpoint, if he had Bill O'Brien as his head coach, O'Brien might have jumped in already at that point, and
Give me the playbook.
and you're cut off at the knees. Yeah, I can empathize with Bill O'Brien there. That's like when I try to teach a child anything. I'm just kind of like, oh no, let him do it. Let him make the mistakes. We gotta go. We gotta get to McDonald's. Let me tie your shoes.
And honestly, Gotsi hasn't been a play caller since. He has not. He's been around tight end coach, position coach, but I think the right call was made at that moment. It's just how you go about it and how you help guys groom and grow as a play caller is tough.
Yeah. Well, speaking of educating children, you got to get back to educating children. So I'm going to let you do that. And we'll meet on Monday. This is where I am with this game right now. The Texans, yes, they're on the road, but look, you can't lose this game. You can't lose this game to a Ravens team, especially if they don't have Lamar Jackson, that has been struggling so badly on defense. And now they've got multiple defensive starters out, even more so than they had before. And you can't lose this game. You can't start off 1-4. But then B, even if the Texans win 6-3, I'm gonna be upset with the offense. I need to see them. I need to see them do some really good stuff for 4 quarters versus a bad defense.
A bad defense. They've been giving up 30-ish points a game.
Yeah.
And you can't put it would be a bad look if your offense doesn't do well against especially the banged up injury situation that's going on that defense side of the ball.
Yeah, we can't see Nick Haley, first-time play caller, replaced by D'Amico Ryans, first-time offensive play caller.
That would be crazy.
All right, we'll see you on Monday.
All right, take care.
So that was former scout team quarterback and Texans wide receiver Cecil Shorts. I did not know that about Cecil. That is a lot of fun when you get to do something in practice that you're not accustomed to. I'd say the opposite of that is when in an actual game as a defensive lineman, defensive tackles especially, they drop you off into coverage. And they don't ask you to do a whole lot. You're not out there for your athleticism or your ability to move in space. You're trying to be something that the quarterback's not accustomed to seeing and just extra traffic, but you do have coverage responsibilities. And the toughest thing is if you're supposed to hit a guy as a crosser, if he comes underneath you, those guys move so fast and you're still in a game, especially it looks like tracer bullets coming across you. I never enjoyed that. Never enjoyed dropping off into coverage. In college as a defensive end, I had to do it a good amount, but then as a big fat nose tackle in the NFL, it sucked. As far as the Texans offense that Cecil and I were talking about, going against a defense that's been struggling, but a couple of those games were against the Bills and the Lions. You can understand them giving up points in those situations, but they haven't been themselves for a variety of reasons. The injuries are one of them. Van Noy being injured, but Matabike especially, that's been rough. And then on the back end, because of injuries or just poor play by Awuzie, the cornerback, or others, they've had to play with more defensive backs, put lighter bodies on the field, and then you don't have Matabike playing up front. They've really gotten gashed in the ground game at times, and they've gotten gashed by some of the plays that the Texans do like to run or want to be able to run, like duo, where you're just double teaming the defensive tackles up into the lap of the linebacker. The Lions especially really, really just destroyed the Ravens defense, but it is still the Ravens. Zach Orr, the defensive coordinator, is under a lot of heat right now. Largely not just because of the performance, but the way that it's looked. There's been a lot of sloppiness, just poor communications, mental errors, breakdowns, things like that really allowed Buffalo and Detroit to go off on them. And those teams are really adept at figuring out how to get the mismatches, what coverages, using motion to figure out what coverages the Ravens have been playing. I don't know if the Texans are at that level. If we talk about where the Texans offense has genuinely perhaps improved or shown signs of improvement, CJ's not getting blitzed as much. And it's been successively in each week, the pressure rate goes down a little bit. I think the offensive line has improved in some regards, but I think some of that is also just CJ getting rid of the ball really quickly, just dinking and dunking, throwing a lot of times with precision and everything. It's not like they're always easy throws, but they've taken a get the ball out of the quarterback's hands mindset. When they've taken their deep shots, they've tried to have max protection. Sometimes even that breaks down, or guys aren't open downfield because you've only got 2 guys out on routes. So it's it's certainly not a polished product. We know that. That's not a news alert to any of you guys. CJ was asked in his press conference yesterday about how this evolution of Nick Caley's offense is going so far.
CJ, after 4 games, how have you seen this Nick Caley offense start to evolve more?
A lot, man. You know, it's tough, you know, because for him, you know, he's done a good job of trying to listen to other guys, but also keep his core mentality and core plays. But, you know, this game's evolving. It's not, you know, what it used to be, and it's not what it was last year. You got to just find like Coach Day used to always say in college, every year when we hit the offseason for, like, self-scout, he would always say you have to become the new iPhone. You know, like, every year you got to upgrade or you'll get caught up. So, like, iPhone, they come out with a new iPhone every year, you know, so they don't get caught up from other brands. So I think that's the same thing, like, but it takes time. It's not just overnight. I think he's doing a good job of, like, listening to what I like, to what the team likes. And a lot of our guys are young, so a lot of the run and gun and, like, the fun stuff is, like, easy for us because we've done it before, but we're just trying to both get off, you know, our mark and, you know, push towards being uncomfortable with being uncomfortable with one another, but also trying to get some comfort plays in as well.
Yeah, I think you're saying trying to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, perhaps, as you're adopting any new thing. And CJ warned us about this himself in the preseason, said, hey, there's going to be hiccups along the way when you're trying to add all of these things and change an offense, not just an offense, but a methodology, the way the quarterback is operating. We've seen really good moments where CJ and his command at the line of scrimmage has helped them a lot. Like the Higgins touchdown we've talked about, that was him recognizing the look, dialing up the matchup he wanted in Jaden Higgins, and then they got it. It was perfect. The downside of it was that sack that CJ took in under 2 seconds by Simmons in the Tennessee Titans game, that was, in my mind, it looked to me like the communication was suspect somewhere along the way because CJ made a check at the line of scrimmage, play clock's winding down, and it's very clear that they were running 2 separate plays on that play. I'm still not convinced it was actually I think it was going to be a pass play because the receivers were running converging routes downfield. But you could see that the O-line, you had 2 guys running one play, you had 3 guys running another play. Dalton Schultz is watching, just confused. So the process pre-snap, the communication, everything else, I'm not even saying it was CJ's fault. Something got gummed up in the process there, and that needs to continue to work. The thing about the Ravens is they do a really good job. Well, they usually on defense do a good job. They're at least going to try to do a lot of simulated blitzes, disguised coverages and everything. Makes it tougher to operate pre-snap. The Ravens just haven't been executing really that whole process all that well. The other area where I think they've just definitively improved as an offense, whether that means they're good or not, we'll see over the next few games, but getting the rookies involved. And I try real hard not to say, hey, you definitely should have had those guys playing way more snaps early on because you don't know how fully integrated Woody Marks was into the scheme, how ready Higgins really was. But wherever they are at now, you can see what their speed does and what Woody Marks especially can do when given the opportunity. They still haven't targeted him all that many times, but the passer rating when targeting him is really good. There's no reason to not make him more a part of the passing offense, especially because he's shown an aptitude for actually pass blocking well. I mean, he looks smarter in pass protection than a lot of the veteran running backs. And rookie running backs, it doesn't typically go that way. It doesn't typically work out that your rookie running back even cares about pass blocking. But Woody Marks is really good in that aspect, especially by rookie standards. And you're one of the worst scoring offenses in the league right now. You got nothing to lose by putting him in. I probably shouldn't have talked about the prospect of Caley being replaced just yet this early in the season, but I knew that Cecil had been in a situation where George Godsey got replaced by Bill O'Brien, or Bill O'Brien inserted himself into the process, and it worked out well. That was a year where the Texans started off 1-4, which is still a possibility for the Texans, but ended up going on a winning streak, and they made the playoffs that year. They got destroyed by the Chiefs in the playoffs, but it's certainly not impossible to start off this slow. In that instance, it was also with the change in play calling back to Bill O'Brien from George Godsey. D'Amico Ryans can't be the play caller here, and I don't think D'Amico would make a change like that before, certainly not before the bye week. It might be something they discuss after the bye week, but that's why this game matters a lot. You got to show and build on some of the things you did against Tennessee. And Tennessee also, and these are baby steps, but for whatever it's worth, the Texans were, they had 2 11-play drives in that game. They were dinking and dunking their way down the field. They didn't get into the red zone in the first half, but they had those 2 11-play drives in the first half to where it looked like they were in more command of the game than the Titans were. We just had no reason to believe that at some point the dam was going to break. If the Texans were proven to be a good offense and they played that way in the first half, I would have thought watching it, I would have said, all right, the dam's going to break at some point. They're going to bust one open. And eventually that is what happened. We don't have a reason to really believe that. On the flip side of the equation, the Texans defense has been playing incredibly well. Very, very good. And yet you're facing Derrick Henry. And we've seen the Texans absolutely destroy Derrick Henry. Very rarely we've seen it, but it was in 2023 in both those performances. Derrick Henry had the worst game he's ever had in his entire career, the one game, 16 carries for 8 yards or somewhere thereabouts. I mean, they just completely shut him down. That's when they could load the box. They could focus all of their energy on Derrick Henry because the quarterback was Will Levis. So whether Lamar Jackson plays or Cooper Rush plays, you can only get away with loading the box versus one of those guys. You try to load the box up continually versus Lamar Jackson, and he's going to make you pay for it. So if Cooper Rush is in the game, then it can become much more about, hey, play some shell coverage behind us and just go ahead and attack these guys. Or not even shell coverage. Just go ahead and attack these guys. Go ahead and load the box. Play man. Do all those things, and we'll take care of Cooper Rush. If it's Lamar Jackson, you can't do that until you start to get a feel for whether or not he's going to be a runner at all in the game, or if they're going to go easy on him because of his hamstring situation. The run game and how much they use Derrick Henry, I think with or without Lamar Jackson, based on John Harbaugh criticizing not running the ball in crucial situations, based on just Derrick Henry only having 31 carries in the last 3 games combined, and then also Lamar Jackson, whatever his health status is, I think they're going to try to make this a smash mouth, run it, to establish the run, et cetera, make it as easy as possible on Cooper Rush. And the battle really becomes, okay, can they stop Derrick Henry? Like they have in the past, certainly didn't do it last year. This is one part of the press conference that I didn't like from CJ Stroud. He was asked about how things might be different this year for him in Baltimore than, say, it was 2 years ago in Baltimore in the first game he ever started, or last year on Christmas Day when the Texans didn't even show up.
Are you confident that you'll be able to perform better this time around against them than you did then?
Yeah, definitely.
Why is that?
Just because we're a new team, it's a new season, new circumstances. Don't got to play 3 games in 10 days.
Yeah, that last part there. I wish CJ hadn't said that, and he might have regretted saying it afterwards because it sounds like it's an excuse. Yes, playing 3 games in 10 days is hard. The problem is that the Ravens had to do the same thing. Like they had the exact same schedule the Texans did, having to play those 3 games, culminating in a Christmas game, and they were the road team in that game. So that it's a challenge. Yes, the Texans were having to learn how to deal without Tank Dell. Stephon Diggs was already gone before that. And they were difficult circumstances, but it was difficult for everybody that played that Christmas Day game. So I don't think that CJ was trying to say it as an excuse or anything, but certainly your ability to game plan for the Ravens this time around is going to be a lot different than it was last year. Hopefully that's just one small part of a victorious effort. So the over-under in this game, it's been fluctuating a little bit, but it started off at 38.5. Now FanDuel has it at 40.5. It had gone up as much as 41.5. I think that's less about Lamar Jackson, the fact that it increased initially. Obviously, like I don't think people think that Cooper Rush is going to score as many points than Lamar Jackson on average. But the fact that the Ravens defense has so many starters banged up and they were already struggling defensively, that probably tweaks it up a little bit. The other question, it's still a low points total overall. Obviously, even if Lamar Jackson plays, if the Texans offense can't get it going, the Ravens are the team that's able to control the clock, make it a lower scoring game just because they decide to run the ball when they have a lead. Ravens have struggled to maintain leads. That's another thing that makes me think John Harbaugh is really going to want to get into a conventional run game so you can just grind clock when you do have a lead. All those things and all of these things that have plagued the Ravens at times in the past, I think a lot of it just kind of comes full circle, and you're gonna get a classic smash mouth football game, especially if Lamar Jackson doesn't play. I think they try to give Derrick Henry the ball 25, 30 times. Texans have been trying to focus on getting more turnovers. Derrick Henry has fumbled the ball 3 times this year so far. So I think it's going to be a really interesting game. Hopefully a fun one for all of us. Please like, subscribe on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple, could you leave us a 5-star review and some glowing, kind words if you feel we deserve them? Thank you, everybody, and thanks to FanDuel for sponsoring the Believe in Texans podcast.